Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Watercolor Instruction by me. So today I'm going to cover a few basic elements on how to do clouds. Try to think clouds as a 3D, not as a flat thing. So just to give an example, this is just a pencil and a paper at the moment. So consider that's a small flat ellipse, but if there is, let's say that's a light direction, so obviously you understand that the shadows, the same thing if you want to make it a little more like a toy cloud. So let's say those are globules, so you're still trying to think about in terms of shadows. Shadows, and that's something you want to evolve, let's say something like that. That is a more true representation of what it is, but you can still see there's a little bit of shadow elements to it, and then obviously the bottom is a lot more darker, and there's, because it's a lot of globules. So think that way. I wouldn't draw on the paper itself. This one's going to be more wet on wet. So what I'm going to try to represent is, since the exercise is more for clouds, I'm going to do a horizon. Maybe I'm going to do a little bit of grass. But the shape probably I'm trying to think about is these, something like that. Yeah, so you can have, that's the cloud. There's a little bit of darkness here, and maybe let's say we do it on that one. So what I'm gonna do is not draw on it, so but something in that style, maybe 2 peaks or a 3 peak. And we're going to try to do. I will post this as a reference image on the drawing in the video, but something like that. So what we are using at the moment is 300 gram Saunders rough paper. I absolutely, at least for this exercise, try to get as thick paper as possible. There's a little bit of hair stuck. It doesn't want to come in. Make sure that it is completely tied in because it's going to be wet. And for the wash, I'm using a big mop. I've got 3 sizes. So one I'm going to use is just to wash the paper, or use a lot of pigment and water in the brush and then paint it. And then I have 2 more to just load a little more pigments. A lot of people suggest using flat brush. I don't particularly use a lot of flat brush. I use it occasionally for buildings and other things, but I prefer round. I'm comfortable with it. If you want to knock on using a flat brush, go for it. And then also sometimes to blend, either you can use a bristle. This is just a regular oil bristle brush, and then I've got 3 different shapes. Everything, the edge of the clouds are always really soft. So you're trying to use something to blend. Pencil, you don't need it. Obviously you need a roll of tissue. I'll use as much tissue as possible to keep it clean. And on my right side, I have a John Pike palette. I have 20 colors, ranging from yellows to browns to reds, greens. There's indigo, and then there's blue, and there's turquoise and gray. So for this exercise, what I'm going to be using is either cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, and a cobalt blue, and maybe a little bit of red and gray. So the colors, again, is not important as long as there's some shade of blue and even a little bit of dramatic. If you can add a little bit of purple and violet. I got 2 waters. One, I'm trying to keep it a little cleaner so that in case I want to do a wash, I don't want to add an element of color onto the paper. and cleaner water. So this one looks slightly yellow. I'm gonna just swap it so that that one's going to be my wash water, and this is just to clean the brush. I got a little bit of sponge just to soak up extra water. And without any further ado, let's go ahead. Make sure you have plenty of tissue scrunched up, so that what we're doing is wetting the whole paper, and then the clouds we are lifting with the tissue. Okay. And in terms of the colors, let me just show you. So we're going to use maybe cerulean blue. I'm not going to mix the whole thing, but just to give you an idea, lots of cerulean blue. Maybe I'm going to add a little bit of vermilion red just to give you a little bit of violet, and a little bit of Payne's gray to give that effect. So blue, violet, gray, and I've got some purple as well. So if I fancy, I'm going to do some purple as well. Okay, so I'm going to use slightly big brush. This is a size 8. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to wet the paper a little bit of purple. Also, another thing, the clouds are never too white. It always has some shade of different color, maybe a gray or a blue. Good example is to take a piece of white paper, watch it against the cloud. It's never white. So having a little bit of shade does help. So in this one, I'm just putting a little bit of blue, and I'm washing. This is the first wash. Basically, I'm making it wet, but while I'm making it wet, I'm putting in a little bit of blue color. Okay, so I'm not being particularly bothered about making sure every nook and corner is wet, and I'm gonna just go ahead and don't worry about it. I'm just putting in colors at this stage. Little bold, a little bit of ultramarine. Oh, and that one is about the horizon. I didn't mention it, but I'm just going to stop to build the horizon. I'm going to add a little more purple, a little bit of gray. Okay, so that will be my first coat. While it's wet, I'm going to just go ahead and pick a little more colors. I'm controlling how much I'm pressing. So twist and turn, 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 twist and turn. So that will be my first layer. All right, so obviously already, depending on how I pressed it, you can already see a little bit of shade. I'm gonna stick with slightly smaller brush. I'm gonna add a little bit of layer, very light. I'm watering down a lot, and I'm gonna add a little more colors suggesting the shape. Oh, that one is a bit strong. That's all right. And that will be my first layer. And now, if you think there is a little more water, you're always trying to soften the edge. If there's any sharp edges, have that roll of tissue, and you're softening the man-made edge. So what you're trying to have is a really soft edge. Now let's come back and then darken the sky, but before doing that, I'm going to just let it dry for a few seconds. I will come back once the painting dries a little bit. I'm just adding a little more gray to the bottom. Let's just wait for a couple of minutes, and then we'll see you back in a minute. Okay, so the painting is not very dry. I usually use a hair dryer to dry it or wait for it to dry. I got young kids. The kids are sleeping, so I'm going to try to crack on. It's dry a little bit. I would have wanted to dry a little more, but I will crack on just to add a little more depth to the sky first. So I'm just adding a little more blues, and keep remembering, if you're trying to soften the edges, you don't want harsh edge for a cloud. So you're mixing, matching. I have a tissue, just roll it, make sure there's nothing sharp. I'm coming back, I'm mixing a little more ultramarine, cerulean blue. I'm coming in, not everywhere, just darkening it. So darkening it, and I'm using the tissue just to soften the edge. You can use the brush as well, but I just feel a tissue gives a nice softer edge than a brush. That's just one texture. So if you're happy using either way, so I'm coming in a bit more stronger. Don't be afraid, go bold, and you're trying to do a little darker clouds. Why not? And I'm coming back again, lifting up just the edge just to make sure that it doesn't have any sharp edges. All right, and also keep in mind the painting dries. When it dries, it's probably 20-30% less, not as sharp, it's much more dull. So I'm going to come back, just add a little more texture. A little more blue. And I'm going to start adding a little more colors to the clouds now. So make it very pale, as you can see. Extremely watered down. It's still a little dark. I'm going to water down a lot more. Water down a little bit. And just using the brush to do some shapes. I'm going to use the tissue to break the edge. I'm going to repeat that just to get a little bit of shape. break that edge. Break that edge. Let's see if I can come over here. Break that edge a little bit. I'll come over here. So let's assume the light is from that direction. So I'm just breaking the edge a little bit, and I'm going to go one shade slightly darker, and I'm going to just add a few more in the bottom. Maybe one couple more here. Maybe. All right. Okay. So I will just wait for it to paint a little, dry a little bit, and then I'm going to add a little more dark undertones. While that one is getting fine, I'm going to just add a little more foreground. This is not the part of the exercise I'm interested, but I'm putting in a little bit of yellow ochre mixed with blue. And another thing to make the painting or the clouds to look more dramatic, you use something in the foreground. When you look at the master painters, they have a small birds or a little bit of tree lines, gives you that scale. So I'll just put in a little bit yellow ochre, and I'm going to just use a little bit of stiff brush because the paint is a little wet. I'm going to just come in and dab a little bit of green, ultramarine blue, so it's just a suggestion that there is a tree line. Obviously, if there is a water body, then you make a reflection. In this case, reflection is not the criteria, so I'm going to just add a little bit of warmer tones, darker tones. That was a bit too much. That's all right. We can always clean the brush, take it out. It's not. Yes, that's fine. That's a Hooker's brown. It's one of the paint browns which is extremely strong. I rarely use it, but it's good when you need for trees and branches. So that gives you the scale. And also, maybe if it's a little dry, I'll come in a little bit of yellow, cerulean blue, a little bit of grass in the foreground. That's not the exercise, but because we are waiting for the clouds to dry and I can't use the hair dryer, I'm forced to. Okay, so a little more tissue just to soak up. I'm going to come in, add a little more undertones to complete the painting. So a little bit of gray. Okay, so just a suggestion, a little dark, a little bit of dark here. So obviously knowing when to stop. couple places a little. Okay, that's it. And I'm going to just come in, just soften the edges if there is a strong edge. A strong edge is basically, it looks like a man-made edge. So I'm just coming in, softening. I'm just making a really small point. As I said, you could easily do that using a brush. Usually a bristle brush works better than a softer brush, but the idea is to soften the edge. And we're almost there. Add one more layer in the bottom. And that would complete this exercise. Maybe I'm going to just add a little bit of grass, and voila. So that I will let it wait, let it dry. While it's drying, I'm going to just make sure that there is no sharp edges. And thank you for watching again. I hope you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing and then click that notification button so that you don't miss the next opportunity. I'm going to do another one or two more sky, maybe a red sky on a similar basis, and then maybe landscape portrait mode. I'll do a few more, maybe at least one or two more skies before I close the series. Thanks again, and see you in the next episode. Bye.